Some memories don't arrive all at once. They come back in flashes. The smell of old wood, the sound of coins dropping into a tin, the creak of a back door closing behind you. I was 10 years old the day my mother sold me, but I didn't understand it that way back then. At 10, you think adults make choices because they know best. You think love, even when it hurts, must still be love. It wasn't until years later that I realized she hadn't just let me go. She traded me for a promise. We lived at the edge of town in a house that always felt too small for the noise inside it. My mother worked at the diner, long hours, loud voice, red lipstick that left prints on her coffee mugs. She'd say things like, "You gotta be tough, girl. Nobody's coming to save you." And I believed her because nobody ever did. My father had left 2 years earlier, just before Christmas. The morning he left, he told me to keep an eye on my mother. He said, "I think she's tired of this place." He lit a cigarette in the doorway. I didn't know what tired of this place meant until I saw her staring at the ceiling some nights, whispering to no one, "There has to be more than this." It was a Friday in late May when she told me to pack a small bag. She said we were going for a drive. I remember the smell of her perfume mixing with gasoline as she started the car. I remember how she hummed the song under her breath, one I didn't recognize, too calm for the tension sitting in her jaw. We drove past the edge of town, past the school, past the lake where I used to feed ducks with my father. The roads turned to gravel, then dust. She didn't say where we were going. When I asked, she said, "Someplace better." At 10 years old, better could mean anything: a fair, an ice cream shop, a surprise. But something about the way she gripped the steering wheel told me this wasn't that kind of surprise. Tell me in the comments, have you ever felt something was wrong, even before anyone said the words? We stopped outside a small house with peeling blue paint and a screen door that hung crooked. A man came out to meet us. He was older, with hair that looked wet even in the dry heat. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. He said, "So this must be her." I remember how my mother's hand tightened on my shoulder, the pressure more warning than comfort. She said, "Be good, all right? Do what you're told." Her voice cracked only once, on the word good. The man led us inside. The house smelt like dust and oil. On the table sat a brown envelope. He opened it, and I saw bills, folded, counted, quiet. He slid it toward her, and she didn't look at me when she took it. I thought maybe it was rent money, or maybe she owed him something. I didn't understand what could be worth me. She stayed for tea. They talked in low voices while I sat on the couch tracing patterns in the worn fabric, pretending not to hear the words, "a few months," "I'll come back," and "she's a good girl." When she finally stood, she kissed the top of my head and said, "You'll be fine, sweetheart. Be good." Then she walked out the door, and I didn't know it was goodbye. The man's house was quiet after she left. He told me I could have the small room at the end of the hall. He told me to call him Mr. Boyd. He told me that if I wanted dinner, I'd have to earn it. At 10, I didn't know what that meant. Not yet. That night, I lay in the strange bed with a blanket that smelled like cigarettes, staring at the ceiling, waiting for the sound of her car to come back. It never did. If you're still here, tell me, do you remember the exact moment you realized someone wasn't coming back for you? Because I do. It sounded like a car engine fading down a dirt road, and a door that never opened again. The first few nights in Mr. Boyd's house blurred together, like pages left out in the rain. I remember the color of the wallpaper, yellow, faded, curling at the corners. I remember the way the floors groaned when he walked, how the kitchen light buzzed like a fly that never slept. And I remember waiting every night for the sound of tires on gravel, for my mother's car to come back and get me. It never did. At 10, you don't have the language for betrayal. You just call it waiting. Mr. Boyd wasn't cruel in the way stories sometimes make men like him. He wasn't loud or angry. He was something worse, quiet. He moved through that house like someone who didn't believe in witnesses. He spoke little, smiled less, and treated me like a chore he couldn't cross off his list. During the day I cleaned. I swept, folded, and learned the difference between doing something wrong and doing something not his way. He'd correct me with silence, long, heavy silences that made me feel smaller than the broom I was holding. At night, he locked the doors, even from the inside, said it was for safety, said bad people wander, and somehow I believed him. A week passed before I realized I wasn't supposed to ask questions anymore. He'd given me a new name, Lila. He said it was easier that way. Easier for who, he never said. But I remember writing it in my notebook, over and over, in shaky pencil. Lila. It didn't feel like me. It felt like a story I'd been pushed into. If you're still here, tell me, have you ever been called something that wasn't yours and felt yourself start to disappear under it? Sometimes people came by the house, mostly men. They talk in low voices, stand near the porch, exchange envelopes. I didn't understand much, but I knew enough to notice that every time someone left, Mr. Boyd counted something. One night, I heard him on the phone. He said, "She's quiet, does what she's told." Then a pause. Then, "I can find another if you want." Those words planted a seed of knowing in me, the kind that doesn't bloom all at once. It just waits. And when it blooms, it hurts. I started marking the days on the wall behind my bed, just small scratches at first, one for each sunrise. I thought if I kept track, it would lead me back to her somehow, as if counting could turn into finding. Then one afternoon, the doorbell rang. Mr. Boyd told me to stay in my room, but the floorboards in that house carried sound like whispers. I could hear a woman's voice, kind, firm. It wasn't my mother's. She said, "We got a call from the diner. Someone said a little girl went missing from town." He laughed, a short, practiced sound. "There's no little girl here. You're mistaken." I pressed my ear against the wall, heart pounding. The woman's shoes creaked closer to the doorway. "I'll need to take a look," she said. He hesitated, and in that pause, that small, dangerous pause, something changed. He opened the door just a crack, enough for her to peek inside. I froze, too scared to move, too hopeful to breathe. Her eyes met mine, and for the first time in weeks, someone looked at me like I was real, like I wasn't a transaction, like I was a child again. She smiled, small, careful. Then she said, "It's okay, sweetheart. What's your name?" And I wanted to say Lila because that's what I'd been told to be, but instead what came out was my real name, the one my mother used before she traded it away. That's how they found me. It turned out a waitress at the diner, a woman named Kathy, had noticed my mother's sudden absence from work and her nervous hands when she'd last seen her. She'd overheard talk about a man helping out, and when my mother didn't show up again, Kathy called the police. They found me 3 weeks after the day I'd been taken. 3 weeks that felt like years folded into silence. If you're listening, tell me, have you ever been saved by a stranger who didn't even know they were saving you? When they took me home, my mother wasn't there. The house was empty.
A neighbor said she'd gone off with some man, maybe to the next county. No forwarding address, no letter. It was just me, and the paper bag of my clothes. The officer who drove me back asked if I wanted to stay with a relative. I said no. I didn't want anyone else to own my name. They placed me with a foster family, kind people, quiet house, a yard with swing sets and safety. But even then, I used to wake up some nights thinking I still heard that car door closing. The sound of her leaving never really left me. And, in a way, neither did she. Because love, even when it breaks you, lingers like a bruise that doesn't know when to fade.
The foster family that took me in was named the Harpers, Ellen and Joe. They lived on a quiet street with a mailbox shaped like a birdhouse and wind chimes that sang even when the air was still. Their house smelled like cinnamon and laundry soap. After what I'd come from, that smell alone felt like mercy. Ellen was soft-spoken, the kind of woman who could make a child feel safe just by setting down a plate of pancakes. Joe had the kind of laugh that filled a room. They never asked too many questions at first. They just let me be, quiet. And silence, for the first time, didn't mean danger. It meant rest. At 10, I didn't know how to trust kindness. Every good thing looked suspicious, like a trick I hadn't figured out yet. If Ellen hugged me, I'd stiffen. If Joe complimented my drawing, I'd hide it. If someone said, "You're safe now," I'd think, that's what he said too. Healing isn't a moment. It's a slow, careful permission you give yourself, piece by piece. A social worker came by once a week. She always brought coloring books as if bright pages could color over what had happened. One day, she said, "Your mother's been located." I remember my stomach tightening. I didn't know if that was supposed to be good news or bad. She added softly, "She's in another town. She's not ready to see you yet." I nodded. But what she didn't say, and what I later learned, was that my mother had been arrested for fraud and theft, that the money she got from selling me was gone before she even made it out of the county. Sometimes I think that's what guilt looks like when it's too late, spending what you got from the one person you should have protected. Ellen must have seen something in my face that day because she said, "You don't owe her forgiveness right now. You just owe yourself peace." Those words stayed with me for years. They became my compass. Whenever the past tried to crawl back into my dreams, I'd repeat them in my head. I just owe myself peace. Tell me in the comments, have you ever tried to forgive someone? Not because they deserved it, but because you were tired of carrying the weight? As months turned into years, I started to rebuild a kind of normal. School, friends, birthdays, all the things children should have without having to earn them. But there was always one thing missing, a place in my chest that still looked like the back seat of that car, waiting for a mother who never turned around. I wrote letters I never sent. I'd start them the same way every time. "Dear Mom, I'm okay now. I just want to know why." But I never mailed them. Some questions don't need answers. They just need release. When I turned 16, Ellen and Joe officially adopted me. They asked if I wanted to change my last name. I said yes, but I kept my first name, the only part of my old life that hadn't betrayed me. That night, Ellen baked a cake with the words "Welcome Home" written in icing. And for the first time, I realized home wasn't a place. It was a promise kept. Years later, I'd hear my mother's name again. It was a small-town newspaper article, 2 paragraphs tucked between local announcements. She'd passed away in a motel, far from anyone who knew her. No obituary, no flowers, no note. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with that paper, tracing her name with my thumb until it smudged. I thought I'd feel anger or relief, but what I felt instead was something quieter, pity.
because the woman who sold me had never sold her loneliness. She carried it all the way to the end. If you're still here, tell me, have you ever lost someone who was already gone long before they left? That night, I went out to the backyard. The wind chimes were singing again, the same song they'd always sung when the world was calm. I whispered, "I forgive you, Mom." And the strangest thing happened. I meant it. Not for her, but for me. Because forgiveness isn't saying what you did was okay. It's saying I won't let it define me anymore.
The older I grew, the more I realized that survival isn't about escaping what happened. It's about learning how to live alongside the memory without letting it own you. For years, I carried the story like a shadow. It followed me everywhere, into friendships, into love, into the quiet moments when I thought I'd finally outgrown it. But the truth is, you never really outgrow something like that. You just learn how to hold it more gently. After college, I came back to the same small town. Not because I missed it, but because I needed to make peace with the place that almost swallowed me. The diner where my mother used to work had closed. The house where we lived had been torn down. Only a patch of weeds left where the porch used to be. I parked the car, got out, and stood in that emptiness for a long time. The air still smelled like dust and wildflowers. Somewhere nearby, a wind chime rang from a neighbor's porch, and for a moment I imagined it was Ellen calling me in for dinner again. I whispered, "I made it." It wasn't defiance. It was gratitude. Sometimes people ask how I survived it, the betrayal, the loneliness, the part of childhood that ended too soon. And I always tell them the same thing. I met kindness before I forgot what it looked like. Ellen and Joe never tried to erase my past. They just gave me a softer place to set it down. And that, I've learned, is the only way healing ever really works. A few years ago, I started volunteering at a community center, helping kids in the foster system with reading and art.
One afternoon, a little girl drew a picture of a house with no doors. When I asked her why, she said, "So no one can leave." Something inside me broke and mended all at once. I told her, sometimes people leave because they don't know how to stay, but that doesn't mean you're not worth staying for. She looked at me, thoughtful, then drew a door after all, small but there. And that night, I cried, not from sadness, but from the way healing sometimes looks like a child drawing a doorway. Tell me in the comments, have you ever realized that the kindness you give others is really the healing you wish someone had given you? Last year, I found an old photograph in a thrift shop. It was my mother. You could barely tell. The photo was creased, the edges yellowed, but I knew those eyes. Someone had written 2003 on the back. I bought it for 50 cents. When I got home, I placed it on my bookshelf beside a candle. I didn't light it out of grief, but out of gratitude, because without her choices, painful as they were, I might never have found the people who taught me what real love looks like. That's the strange mercy of life. Even broken beginnings can grow into something whole. Sometimes, late at night, I still hear that car door closing in my dreams. But now, it's not a sound of abandonment. It's just the echo of who I used to be, the little girl waiting and the woman who came back for her. Because I did come back, not to that house or that road, but to myself. And if you've ever been left behind, I hope you know, one day You will too. I am not the girl who was sold. I am the woman who lived. And that is enough. Because here on True Life Stories, we don't just tell stories, we remember them. Subscribe, stay with us, and help this silence end, one true story at a time.